Welcome back to another episode of Casey Campbell's Videocast. Actually, it's a special edition because Mark Ewell is here, and you know when he's here, we have things to talk about regarding the MHSAA. There was some big news today, but I'll get to that in a minute. But first, as we enter in the last weekend of the high school football season, there have been some cancellations announced within the hour, and there's also a weather system going through tonight. So are you surprised? Are we seeing more cancellations this week than we have all season, Mark? Or is this normal?
It's been kind of, first of all, good to be with you, Casey. It is kind of the new normal. We have charted all the data in each week of the season. That in the first week, we had 99% of our football schools were able to play. The number of COVID-related issues went from 4 to 8 to 18 in the first 3 weeks. But now percentage, we're talking 1%, 1.5%, and 2%. In the last 2 weeks of the season, which were our fourth and fifth weeks, the numbers of COVID-related issues actually decreased. So last week, we only had 11 schools that couldn't play out of 590 based on some kind of a COVID reason. We knew we would have to manage these going through. We knew that COVID wasn't going to disappear, that we had to do everything possible to mitigate the COVID risk, but yet, keep our games as safe as possible. So for the mental health benefits and just keeping kids active and moving again. So I'm aware right now of some COVID cases that have come up to where a team would be in a quarantine, not just for this week, but through next. So right now that number is at 4. I'm sure we'll have a few others that drop, but again, every week of our football season, we've had 95% plus of our football schools be able to play. And I think when you keep your eye on that big picture, again, there have been challenges and hurdles, but overall, we've got an awful lot of kids playing each and every week.
Yeah. There's also, you talked about those teams that are in quarantine for this week and next week. How that would work is, I think if I'm not mistaken, their last day of quarantine would be October 30th, and they would intend to play October 31st, no matter if you're home or away. Because if you're the away team, both teams would not agree because, you don't want to play on the last day of your quarantine, and so it automatically would go to Saturday. And plus, if you're hosting a game, you would obviously choose Saturday if you were in that position. Now, would you advise teams to, I know the kids are going to be practicing on their own, and I know that you can do film sessions off of Zoom. I know teams have been doing that, and we're doing that during the stay-at-home order back in the spring. But is that something that you guys would recommend doing?
Well, really, Casey, in full disclosure, I was a varsity football coach for 12 years. And when we got into the tail end of the regular season, and certainly when it came playoff time, there wasn't much contact during the week at practice. It was, it was making sure that kids were keeping themselves in condition. It was putting in game plan. It was a lot of scouting tendencies, and here's what we're going to expect to see. And I think with the emergence of Zoom, which is working for us today, I think there are ways where coaches can communicate and keep kids up to speed. And if a local county health department says that it's safe to play once a team gets to Saturday, October the 31st, that's the guidance and direction that we're going to follow. So like everything else this fall, Casey, that has looked different and unique from almost any other year that we've lived through, this is just, I think, yet another example of how things are just looking kind of unique and different in this fall of COVID.
Now, next week during the playoffs, this was reiterated by a few people in the media around here and several TV stations. Now, if someone comes down and a program has to shut down throughout the playoffs, they would automatically have to forfeit games. I mean, obviously, you guys have said this has been the long-standing policy for forever, and the playoffs have to go on no matter what.
And that's sports. That's been anything. We've even had that question asked of us, Casey, of, well, let's say it's a cross-country runner, or let's say that it was a tennis player and we're in the middle of the tournament, and let's say it was a very successful athlete. Well, that would be no different than let's put this any other winter time in the wrestling season. So let's assume that for a second last winter, you've got the number one ranked wrestler in the state, and just before the individual district tournament, he comes down with a skin condition, comes down with a case of ringworm, where that student wouldn't be able to compete for a week. The timing is terrible, and if that student can't compete in a round of the tournament, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to get a free pass or a bye to the next level of the tournament without competing. And that's just sports. I mean, that would be true at any level. You know, if a golfer, you know, Tiger Woods can't compete in a qualifying round of a tournament, or if he can't compete until Saturday and Sunday, we wouldn't just say, well, that's okay. You don't have to play on Thursday and Friday to make the cut. We're just going to automatically put you in. That's not how sports work. So with COVID, and I understand that with a quarantine now or a positive case now, the timing could just be awful for kids and teams. But again, that's part of the current reality that we're all living with.
Yeah. Okay, so there was a big announcement today. You guys have approved winter sports. So all winter sports are scheduled to go on time. There's a couple things. It's gonna work similar to the fall, no scrimmages. There are some sports that are gonna have to wear face coverings and are gonna have to mask up. Boys and girls basketball, wrestling, competitive cheer, and hockey. Mark, why did you guys, with winter sports and obviously with the concern that COVID cases are on the rise, and there's no doubt about it, why this decision to advance forward?
So I'll hit on four really quick headlines. So the first is that practices and games are starting on time. We had a long conversation and discussion that's really been going on over the last 2 and 3 weeks about would it make some sense to pause or delay the start of winter. On one hand, that certainly made some sense. You give school people a little bit of a break, kind of a chance to finish up fall before we start in winter. Well, the biggest takeaway that I've had since last summer, Casey, is that kids and families are going to go find athletic activity. Whether we have it through schools or not, they're going to go find it. Well, the thing is, if we would say, all right, we're not going to start winter until after January 1, what we would have done is we would have created a brand new non-school winter season during November and December, where kids would have gone and played on a travel basketball team, and kids would have gone and played on a non-school hockey team, and kids would be in these individual wrestling invitationals every single weekend. And now when I talk to superintendents who want to do everything possible to allow their face-to-face education to go on, imagine now with all of their kids mixing with other kids every weeknight during November and December, playing all of this non-school competition every weekend in those 2 months. But now come Monday, I'm going to try to have face-to-face education when my kids have been spread out with everybody and anybody the previous week or two. So we firmly believe that our kids are safest in our programs, with kids in their same local school community, with our coaches, with the safety protocols we have in place, and with the accountability of coaches having to answer to an AD having to answer to a principal and a superintendent who ultimately answer to a board of education. So highlight one, that's why we're starting on time. Two, when it comes to the limitations, they're very similar to what they were in the fall. So volleyball tournaments went from unlimited numbers of teams down to no more than 4 in an event. So that will be the way that we'll handle things in wrestling and competitive cheer and gymnastics in some of those sports. And then we won't allow winter scrimmages, just like we haven't allowed fall scrimmages, that when we're getting kids and coaches from different schools together, it's when it counts. It's when it matters. So that's the second big one. The third one is when it deals with spectators. So to start the winter off on the right foot, even though current Health and Human Services limitation allows larger gatherings, we're going to start with the 2 spectator per participant. The time now for us to possibly expand and to push for more spectators when our COVID numbers the last 3 weeks are trending in a bad spot, we feel like we need to hit the reset button. There was even conversation about saying 0 spectators for the start of winter. We thought that was a leap a little bit too far. we've got a lot of schools that aren't providing transportation to away games. And so with zero spectators, you'd have moms and dads and other relatives driving someone to an away game, dropping them off, sitting in their car and watching the game on Facebook Live, only to hang around to give them a ride home. So the two per, because we've got experience with that with the fall, that one seemed logical. And then last but not least, dealing with face coverings. If someone want to advocate that, well, we should unmask our athletes. The timing of that for us to make that decision and announcement now, after where our daily cases and positive test rates have gone the last 3 weeks, that's somebody who does not have their finger on the pulse of where things are going. So the mask requirement is from Health and Human Services. We have followed that for the fall, and we will continue to follow that for the winter or until that guidance and direction changes. So 4 different kind of highlights on the changes, but that's the quick rationale of why we made decisions as we did.
Mark, there is the possibility that, the health department could shut down the season. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but does the health department have the power to do that?
They do. Local health departments and the activity that happens within their county or within their area of authority certainly could do so. Now, certainly and I think 3 big takeaways here is what the science and data has shown since August, Casey, is COVID is not being spread during the school. We're just not seeing instances of that. The second big takeaway is we're not seeing examples of COVID being spread during athletic practices. And the third big takeaway is we're not seeing COVID being spread during games, either teammate to teammate, or more importantly, from opponent to opponent. We're just not seeing it. So that's why, even though the case numbers are trending in a bad direction, local school districts are allowed to keep in-person education, and we're allowed to continue with sports because those are things that aren't creating the problems. Where the problems are coming, Casey, it's all the stuff that's kind of loosely connected with sports. It's like after games tonight, it's parents that are going to host a 5th quarter party where let's have all the kids and parents from the team come over and let's get some food. So let's all get some pizza and let's all reach into the same bowl of chips and get some food, and let's all hang out in the living room or in the rec room and let's watch the scores and highlights come in. That's the kind of stuff that's creating real challenges, and it's team dinners and bonding. And by the way, that's the reason we're not having a selection show Sunday night. Because what have teams done in every other year, Casey, is they've gathered at somebody's house or a local restaurant, they've ordered food, they've all sat around indoors with no masks, no social distancing, and we've watched TV for an hour, which is the last thing that we want folks to be doing right now. So if we're really serious about protecting the finish of fall and serious about getting winter off on the right foot and allowing those kids to have a senior with an ending too, we need to all kind of renew our commitment here to doing the right things, to wear a mask, to stay socially distant, follow the guidance. And if we do all that, if we're really serious about our kids and their experience, I just think that now's a good time to remind all your viewers and listeners of that.
So you talked about the 2 tickets per person for the winter. Now, does that just apply for the winter, or is that for the fall? Are we going back to that for the fall?
We're not. So because all winter sports, Casey, are indoors except for skiing, because everything is indoors in the winter, with the onset of flu season not too far away, we kind of wanted to get the winter train started on their own set of railroad tracks, so to speak, and those tracks are going to be 2 per participant, at least through the months of November and December. If COVID numbers improve and swing back the other way, then we can obviously open that up as time goes forward. But I think that starting off small and creating an incentive for folks to do the right things, and then it can grow and expand, was the right way to go. Now, fall sports with those limits, that's a different train that we're going to allow to continue on their set of tracks. So right now, when it comes to cross-country tournaments, soccer and football, all those are outdoors. So we're comfortable with those outdoor limits of up to 1,000 if the facility is large enough. And then even with volleyball, we're comfortable that in our tournament, so district, regional, and beyond in volleyball, because we'll clear the gyms between matches. We think that the 20% indoor up to 500, that's a limit that's doable. So when it comes to spectator limits, using the train analogy, I think makes sense. Imagine it's really two different trains on two different sets of tracks. Fall, we're going to let continue on their set of tracks as they've been going the last few weeks. And then winter, we need to send the message here. If we want to get through the entire winter, we got to get started off on the right foot. One last item I will share is we've all had concerns about flu, that you take COVID and you combine that with flu season, and this is going to be awful. Our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee met this week, and there hasn't been much positive news, but a positive development that one of our doctors shared was, of course, in the southern hemisphere of the world, they're just finishing up winter. They're ready to transition and move into their warm times of the year. Well, the flu season in the southern hemisphere has been the most mild that it has been in decades. Well, the reason why, people are washing their hands, they're staying socially distanced, and they're wearing a face covering. So a lot of things that we're doing to slow and stop the spread of COVID, we need to keep doing that, not just for COVID, but that's going to help us during the winter flu season as well. So as I said, not much positive news to share on the medical front lately, but the news about flu in the southern hemisphere has been one of those.
Okay, so I know you and your office have been getting this question a lot. Are we any closer to finding a site for football for 11-player and 8-player?
Yes. We're not getting closer to being able to announce it. So I will continue. I'm optimistic that our 11-player finals will be indoors somewhere in the largest city in our state, probably. We're just not ready yet to announce that. The Lions are working out some logistics for their home games here coming up in early November. So the Lions, I think they're on the road in Atlanta this weekend, and they play at home a couple times in early November. So kind of stay tuned, but we're hopeful we'll have something to announce here very, very soon. With 8-player, we're going to see how that bracket shakes out on Sunday. That is the one group that will still have a selection Sunday. So we'll look at the geography of teams. We've got a handful of other options. So hopefully next week we'll be able to finalize where those are at. Speaking of football, one other significant change that we made yesterday deals with the 11-player semifinals. Forever, our semifinals have been played at prearranged. I hate to use the term neutral sites because that would suggest if two schools are 150 miles apart, you have to find a field that's exactly 75 miles for both, and that hasn't been the case. But we've arranged sites where all of our semifinal games were. Well, we have 4 big challenges this year. The first is the number of schools that have always volunteered to host those games has been reduced by almost 80%. Schools don't want to host football games, Casey, if their school is not involved in the game. We're doing everything we can to keep our school community safe, our school facilities clean, and allowing 2 outside communities to come in to play a game. There's just a lot less interest. The second, our tournament is going to end later than it ever has before. Semifinal weekend is Thanksgiving weekend. There are a lot of facilities that want to winterize everything. Their outdoor restrooms and water in their stadium, and so they're just not available that late in November. Plus, given the fact of semifinals on a holiday weekend, there's been fewer host sites that wish to volunteer. So when the 2 semifinal teams are less than 200 miles apart, the team with the highest playoff point average will host the semifinal game. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it's just something that we have to do for 2020 to get us through. Now, if the distance between the 2 semifinalists, Casey, is more than 200 miles, which over the last 3 years, we've had 2 years where 1 game was further than that, and then one of the years we had 2 games. If you're further than 200 miles apart, then we will find that prearranged site. Our staff believes we can find a couple of neutral sites to go to rather than having to find 16 this year. So that will be and by the way, that's how we've done things in semifinals in 8-player football forever. So it can happen. The travel is no less extreme in 8-player, but the highest playoff point, you're going to get to host your semifinal this year as well.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. How will Selection Sunday work? I know there's not going to be any show on Fox Sports Detroit, but the brackets, they're going to be all right. I think will teams already know who they will play?
Yeah, so I would think, Casey, after games finish tonight, folks will jump on I think our website is going to get more traffic tonight than maybe it ever has on a Friday night, because after the scores come in, all of our playoff points update in real time. So you know the 7 or 8 schools in your district, and you'll be able to pull that up and see exactly where your school is going to play. We will have the finalized brackets posted on our website at noon on Sunday. So our staff, we're still going to come in Sunday morning. We're going to double check and finalize all the pairings. Do know, Casey, that if we have a COVID outbreak or a team that opts out prior to Sunday morning, they're going to be out of the tournament, and we would then reshuffle or redraw the seeds. So the timing of when a school may drop out is important. But then once we finalize and publish the brackets at noon on Sunday, if we have teams that opt or drop out after that, then their opponent would receive a bye and they would just simply advance, because you can't expect to keep redrawing entire brackets of 7, 8 teams into Monday and Tuesday. So they become final at noon on Sunday, and we'll go forward from there. Not many mysteries for teams this year on Sunday, except for our 8-player, and those pairings will also be posted at noon on Sunday as well.
All right. Mark Ewell, thank you so much. We covered a lot today. Thank you so much for doing this. Enjoy the Friday night games, and we'll talk to you maybe later on in a few weeks.
Thanks, Casey.